Welcome to the Global Political and Economic Network. Today, we're exploring a particularly controversial and complex issue within the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The Ukrainian military's decision to shift its focus towards Kursk, a city located in western Russia, rather than concentrating efforts on the Eastern Front, where the fighting is most intense. This decision has generated significant debate and confusion among military analysts, experts, and even within Ukraine itself, where many are closely monitoring the unfolding situation. To grasp the full scope of the controversy, it's essential to understand the context of the conflict, particularly the dire situation on the Eastern Front of Ukraine. This region has become the main theater of combat, characterized by intense and persistent fighting between Ukrainian forces and the Russian military. In this area, Russian troops have been making continuous and aggressive advances, applying substantial pressure on Ukrainian defensive positions. The nature of this pressure is not merely a tactical challenge, it represents a critical threat that is steadily depleting Ukrainian resources, eroding their combat effectiveness, and diminishing overall morale. Given the severity of the situation, the Eastern Front has become the focal point where the outcome of the conflict seems to be in the balance. Against this backdrop, the decision to redirect Ukrainian military efforts towards Kursk, which is situated far from the immediate combat zones in the east, appears to be puzzling to many observers. Kursk is not currently a hotspot of heavy fighting, unlike the Eastern Front where Russian forces are pressing hard. This geographical and strategic distance from the main areas of intense combat raises questions about the rationale behind targeting Kursk. Critics argue that the forces being allocated to Kursk could potentially have a much greater impact if they were instead deployed to reinforce Ukrainian positions on the Eastern Front. Elite military units, which are among the most well-trained and well-equipped, are particularly valuable in high-pressure combat situations. The argument is that these elite forces could provide crucial reinforcement and support to Ukrainian units engaged in fierce battles on the Eastern Front. Diverting them to Kursk might seem like a misallocation of their potential to make a significant difference where it's most needed. The core issue revolves around whether the Kursk strategy aligns with Ukraine's broader military objectives. Many analysts and experts question whether focusing on Kursk directly contributes to the primary goal of halting and reversing the Russian advance in the eastern regions. Instead, this strategy might be seen as an attempt to create a diversion or to demonstrate military strength in a different area. This approach raises several strategic concerns. One of the main issues is the allocation of resources. Military resources, including personnel and equipment, are limited. Redirecting forces to Kursk means that fewer resources are available to bolster and sustain defenses on the Eastern Front, potentially compromising Ukraine's ability to counter the Russian push effectively in this critical region. Another concern is the strategic focus. In the context of a large-scale conflict, prioritizing immediate and significant threats is crucial. The Eastern Front represents the most pressing challenge for Ukraine, and concentrating efforts there seems to be a more logical approach to achieving strategic objectives. By shifting attention and resources to Kursk, there is a risk of undermining the capacity to address the most urgent and severe threats on the battlefield. Additionally, the overall balance of power and effectiveness in the conflict can be significantly influenced by where and how military resources are deployed. Diverting forces from key areas of combat could inadvertently shift the balance further in favor of the opponent, in this case, the Russian military. This potential shift in the balance of power could have serious implications for the trajectory of the conflict, affecting the overall strategy and its outcomes. The controversy surrounding the Kursk strategy is not limited to external analysts and commentators. Many Ukrainians who are deeply engaged in following the war and possess a nuanced understanding of the military situation are also expressing concerns. They argue that the focus should remain on reinforcing and supporting the Eastern Front, rather than diverting resources to Kursk. This internal criticism reflects a broader sense of frustration and dissatisfaction with the current strategic direction being pursued by Ukrainian leadership. In discussions with military experts, such as my friend Steve Walt, there has been advice to use more measured language when discussing the conventional wisdom about Ukraine's strategy. Steve suggests avoiding extreme terms like no evidence and opting for language such as little evidence if evidence is scarce. While this approach is sensible, it is important to acknowledge that the significant lack of clear and compelling evidence supporting the Kursk strategy is a noteworthy concern. It suggests that the current approach may not be as strategically sound as needed for achieving Ukraine's broader military objectives. Furthermore, it is essential to consider the broader implications of the strategic choices being made. Each decision impacts not only the immediate tactical situation, but also the long-term strategic landscape of the conflict. The allocation of resources, the focus of military efforts, and the overall effectiveness of the strategies employed are all interconnected factors that influence the outcome of the conflict. As the situation evolves, it will be crucial to continuously assess whether the strategies in place are effectively addressing the most pressing challenges and contributing to the overall goals of the conflict. Understanding who is responsible for the war in Ukraine is crucial, as it directly addresses the issue of accountability for the immense suffering and destruction caused by the conflict. This question centers on identifying who should bear the blame for the bloodshed, whether it is Joe Biden and his administration, the broader Western powers, or Vladimir Putin. The prevailing narrative places the primary blame on Vladimir Putin. According to this view, Putin is depicted as the central aggressor with ambitions to expand Russia's territory. This expansionist agenda supposedly includes annexing Ukraine and potentially restoring a broader Soviet empire. This characterization aims to hold Putin accountable for initiating and perpetuating the conflict, portraying him as the key figure responsible for the war's devastating impact. However, the situation is more complex than a simple attribution of blame. The question of responsibility involves various factors and is fraught with risks. The war in Ukraine is not a conflict that will resolve itself quickly or easily. The complexity of the situation means that, as the fighting eventually comes to an end, the debate over who is truly responsible for the bloodshed will become increasingly prominent. The central issue will be whether the blame should rest with Joe Biden and his administration, who have been influential in shaping international policies and responses, or with Vladimir Putin and his government. Looking ahead, it is anticipated that the war in Ukraine will reach a resolution, or at least see a significant reduction in active fighting by 2025. This forecast is influenced by several key factors. First, the extensive damage inflicted by Russian forces on Ukraine's power grid has created severe humanitarian challenges. The approaching winter, coupled with the ongoing destruction of critical infrastructure, is expected to worsen the situation. Additionally, the substantial losses suffered by Ukrainian forces on the battlefield are likely to contribute to a potential ceasefire or a notable de-escalation of hostilities by 2025. To fully understand the origins of the current conflict, it is important to consider the historical context of NATO's expansion. When NATO first discussed the possibility of expanding eastward to include Ukraine, key European leaders such as Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy were opposed to this idea. They recognized that admitting Ukraine into NATO could lead to significant and potentially disastrous consequences. Despite their concerns, the United States exerted considerable pressure on these leaders to endorse the expansion. In April 2008, Merkel and Sarkozy were forced to make a joint statement supporting Ukraine's eventual membership in NATO, which marked the beginning of a contentious period. Since then, the US has pursued an aggressive policy of supporting Ukraine's inclusion in NATO. This push has been accompanied by strong backing from the American government, while European nations, particularly those in Western Europe, have had mixed feelings about the expansion. These Western European countries, while participating in the NATO expansion agenda, were acutely aware of the risks involved. This complex situation has led to the current state of affairs, where Western European nations are now dealing with the repercussions of a policy that many had initially feared could have serious consequences. As the war continues and eventually reaches a resolution, the debate over who is responsible for the conflict will remain a central issue. The search for accountability will have significant implications for international relations and future policies, reflecting the complex interplay of geopolitical interests and historical decisions that have shaped the current crisis. In Israel, nearly everyone feels that they are living in a perpetual state of emergency, primarily due to the ongoing threats posed by their neighbors and the Palestinian territories. This persistent sense of danger has led to a broad consensus among Israelis that this threat is unlikely to dissipate anytime soon. However, within this overarching context of insecurity, there are significant differences in opinion regarding the best way to address these threats. One prominent issue currently dividing opinion is whether or not to accept a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Many Israelis support the idea of a ceasefire, believing that it could potentially lead to a more stable situation. On the other hand, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has consistently opposed such measures, arguing that they may not address the root causes of the conflict or could embolden adversaries. This disagreement highlights the diversity of perspectives within Israeli society on how to handle the ongoing conflict. The Gaza Strip itself is a particularly contentious topic. There are various viewpoints on Israel's presence and strategy in the region. Some Israelis, often those with more moderate or centrist views, argue that staying in Gaza is unwise and that it is better for Israel to withdraw. They see Gaza as a source of continuous conflict and believe that leaving could help reduce the tension. In contrast, there are more hardline individuals, particularly on the right, who advocate for more extreme measures. These individuals believe that Gaza is a crucial part of what they consider the Holy Land and support actions that include not only military responses, but also plans to remove Palestinians from the region and establish Israeli settlements there. When analyzing the situation, it is crucial to differentiate between internal Israeli policies and its external actions. Internally, I have long argued that Israel functions similarly to an apartheid state. This system involves treating Palestinians as inferior and systematically depriving them of basic rights and freedoms. Operating under an apartheid-like regime requires dehumanizing the oppressed group, in this case, the Palestinians, which leads to severe mistreatment. This dehumanization and brutality have been ongoing issues. For many years, Palestinians have faced harsh treatment, including torture and other forms of abuse. The events following October 7th represent a significant intensification of these practices. Reports and surveys reveal a disturbing trend in the way Palestinians are treated, especially in the context of Israeli prisons. A recent poll conducted by Channel 12 in Israel uncovered that nearly half of the Israeli population, 47%, believes it is acceptable for an Israeli to commit sexual violence against a terrorist. This statistic is alarming and reflects a broader societal desensitization to extreme forms of violence. Additionally, the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem released a report titled "Welcome to Hell," which documents the worsening conditions and abuses in Israeli prisons since October 7th. This report underscores that the violence and mistreatment have escalated significantly. The discussion of these issues in public highlights the extent to which Israeli society has been affected by the ongoing conflict. It demonstrates how deeply entrenched and normalized the brutality has become. The fact that such extreme views and practices are not only present, but also openly discussed, and in some cases supported by a significant portion of the population, reflects the profound impact of the conflict on Israeli society as a whole. Examining Israel's interactions with its neighbors, particularly the Palestinians and surrounding Arab countries, reveals a pattern of assertive and often aggressive foreign policy. This approach is evident in the numerous military operations Israel has conducted, not only targeting the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, but also extending to nations such as Syria, Lebanon, and Iran. These actions are a central aspect of Israel's strategy to maintain regional dominance and security through military strength and deterrence. The frequent military interventions by Israel contribute to a relentless atmosphere of tension and conflict. For many in Israel, these aggressive tactics are seen as a necessary measure for national survival. The rationale behind this policy is that a strong military presence and a readiness to use force are essential to protect Israel from various threats and ensure its continued existence. However, this strategy often results in a cycle of retaliation and escalating violence, where each action leads to further conflict rather than resolving the underlying issues. A significant, yet often understated factor in this dynamic is the role of the United States and other Western nations. Israel receives extensive financial and military support from the US, which is crucial for maintaining its military capabilities and pursuing its aggressive foreign policy. This substantial aid allows Israel to uphold its military superiority in the region, contributing to its ongoing assertive stance. The strong support from Western countries, especially the US, means that Israel faces little external pressure to reconsider or alter its approach. The strategic alliance between Israel and Western nations often leads to a tolerance of Israel's actions, even when they might breach international laws or raise moral questions. Internally, both Israel and the Palestinian territories are experiencing significant shifts that impact the conflict. In Israel, there is a growing influence of the radical right, which is pushing for more hardline and uncompromising policies towards the Palestinians. This increasing radicalization within Israeli politics results in tougher measures and less willingness to engage in negotiations or seek peaceful solutions. The policies driven by these radical factions often exacerbate tensions and diminish prospects for conflict resolution. On the Palestinian side, there is also a presence of radical groups that reject any form of compromise and view violence as the primary means to achieve their objectives. These radical elements are fueled by a combination of deep-seated grievances, historical injustices, and a desire for retribution. The radicalization on both sides creates a highly volatile situation where extremism and hostility dominate, making it even more challenging to find a path to peace. The complexity of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, along with Israel's interactions with its Arab neighbors, is further compounded by these internal and external factors. The cycle of violence and radicalization perpetuates a state of conflict that is resistant to resolution. The involvement of the international community, particularly Western countries, plays a crucial role in both supporting efforts for peace and applying pressure to encourage all parties to seek a fair and lasting solution. The dynamic interplay of these elements illustrates the deep-seated nature of the conflict and the significant challenges involved in addressing it. Thank you for joining us on the Global Political and Economic Network. We hope this video provided valuable insights into the complex situation in Ukraine and its broader implications. If you enjoyed this analysis and want to stay updated on our latest content, please consider subscribing to our channel. We'd also love to hear your views, so feel free to leave a comment below with your thoughts or questions. Your engagement helps us continue to bring you in-depth and thoughtful coverage of global issues. We appreciate your support and look forward to having you with us in our next video. Thanks again for watching.